Claire Matthews didn't think much about her husband's coworkers. Mark worked for an architecture firm in Portland, and most of the names he mentioned were just people she nodded at politely during company events. So when she received a text from Mark saying, "Tom will give you a ride to the dinner tonight. I got called out of town," she barely reacted. She just sighed, looked out the window at the drizzle, and went back to folding laundry. Life with Mark had become a quiet routine of schedules, polite smiles, and separate lives under the same roof. That Friday evening, Claire stood in front of the mirror, brushing her shoulder-length hair, unsure why she even cared about the dinner anymore. It was one of those annual community fundraisers, loud music, polite conversations, and faces she'd seen too many times. Still, she went, because that was what she did. She showed up, smiled, and went home. The knock on the door came right at 6. She opened it and saw Tom Tall.com, dressed in a dark jacket, his hair still damp from the rain. He smiled in that polite, unassuming way that made him seem instantly trustworthy. "Claire." Hi. I'm Tom. Mark said I should pick you up." "Yes," she said, returning the smile. "Thanks for coming all the way here. It's quite a drive." He shrugged lightly. "It's no trouble. I live not far from here." The car ride began quietly. The rain tapped gently against the windshield, the wipers moving in steady rhythm. Claire looked out at the gray landscape passing by while Tom drove carefully, the soft hum of the engine filling the silence. "So, how long have you been working with Mark?" she asked finally, her voice light. "About a year," he said. "He's a good guy. Serious, but fair." Claire chuckled softly. "That sounds like him. He's always been a little too serious." Tom smiled at that, glancing at her briefly. "I guess someone has to be." For a while, they didn't talk much. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable. It was simply calm. There was something about Tom's presence that felt steady, like he didn't need to fill every silence. Claire hadn't realized until then how rare that was. When they arrived at the dinner, the event was already buzzing. Warm light spilled out from the community hall, people laughing and greeting each other. Claire thanked Tom for the ride, and he smiled before heading off to talk to a few people from work. She mingled, chatted, and tried to enjoy herself, but her thoughts drifted more than once toward the man who had driven her there so quietly, so kindly. Later that evening, when most people had left and the music had softened, Claire saw Tom again standing near the back, talking with one of the board members. He looked at ease, but there was something quietly thoughtful in his expression. When their eyes met, he smiled in that same understated way, and for a moment, she felt a spark of something she couldn't name. Not attraction, not yet. Maybe recognition? When the event ended, Tom offered to drive her home again. The rain had returned, heavier this time, as they drove through the winding streets. The world outside blurred in soft streaks of light and water. "Thanks for waiting for me," she said quietly. "Of course," he replied. "I wouldn't let you take a cab in this weather." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my husband." Tom gave a small laugh. "Then I'm in good company." They drove in silence for a while before he added, "He talks about you sometimes." That made her glance at him. "Oh, yeah," he said, eyes on the road. "He says you're the calm one, that you make life feel less chaotic." Claire didn't know what to say. It had been a long time since Mark had said anything like that to her directly. Hearing it from someone else, especially from Tom, felt strange. Comforting, but strange. The rain grew heavier, and Tom slowed the car as they turned onto her street. "These roads are terrible," he muttered. "You get a lot of rain here." She nodded. "It never seems to stop. Sometimes I think the sky forgets we exist." He glanced at her again, not in amusement, but in quiet understanding. "I know that feeling." When they reached her house, she hesitated before getting out. "Thank you for the ride," she said softly, "and for keeping me company." "Anytime," he replied. "Okay." Then he gave her that steady look again, the kind that said he really meant it. She stepped out into the rain, clutching her coat tight as she hurried to the porch. But before she opened the door, she turned back. His car was still idling at the curb, headlights casting a faint glow through the mist. And for a brief moment, their eyes met one last time through the rain. When she went inside, the house felt quieter than usual. She took off her coat, set down her purse, and caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. Something about her expression looked unfamiliar, softer, curious, almost awake. That night, as she got ready for bed, she thought about Tom's calm voice, his thoughtful glances, and how easy it had been to talk to him. It wasn't anything more than kindness, she told herself. He was just a friend, her husband's coworker. That was all. But as she turned off the light, she found herself wondering why her heart felt heavier and warmer than it had in a long time. The next morning, Claire found a message from Mark. He apologized for missing the dinner, saying he'd make it up to her when he got back. She smiled faintly, typing a short reply. "It was fine. Tom drove me." The dinner went well, a simple, harmless message. And yet, as she pressed send, she realized. Her mind lingered not on the dinner, but on that quiet drive through the rain. And the man who somehow made silence feel like something worth remembering? She shook her head, dismissing the thought. It was nothing. It's just a kind coworker helping out. Still, when the next Friday came and it rained again, she found herself glancing out the window at the road as if expecting to see headlights pulling into her driveway. A week passed and Claire tried to forget that quiet car ride, but it lingered in her thoughts like the aftertaste of something bittersweet. Mark had returned from his trip, buried in deadlines, and though he greeted her kindly, the distance between them had become something both had learned to live with. They spoke about bills, groceries, and work, never about feelings, never about anything that truly mattered. Then one Thursday afternoon, while she was at the grocery store, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Mark said you handle the fundraising committee, right? I have some documents to drop off for him. Mind if I stop by?" Claire hesitated but typed back, "Sure, that's fine." When he arrived that evening, the sky had turned gray again. Had been raining all day, the kind of steady drizzle that soaked everything and made the air smell of wet earth. Claire opened the door, smiling politely. "You really didn't have to come all this way in this weather." Tom stepped inside, shaking off his umbrella. "It's fine. I was heading this way anyway." He handed her the folder, his hand brushing. Hers slightly, a brief accidental touch that made her heart stumble for just a moment. She offered him coffee, half out of courtesy, half out of something she didn't want to name. He accepted. They sat in the kitchen, mugs in hand, the rain tapping softly against the windows. It felt oddly natural, as if he'd been there before. So she asked, trying to sound casual, "How's work?" "Mark keeping you busy?" Tom smiled faintly. "He's been in meetings most of the week. He's good at what he does, intense but fair." He looked around the kitchen, then at her. "You've made this place feel warm." "I can see why he likes being home." Claire looked down, stirring her coffee, though it didn't need stirring. "Home used to feel warmer," she said quietly, almost to herself. Tom didn't push. He just sat there, listening, the kind of silence that made her feel safe to speak. You ever feel like life just slows down? Not in a peaceful way, but like it's waiting for something to happen? He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think everyone does. The trick is figuring out what you're waiting for." His words stayed with her even after he left. When the door closed, she leaned against it, heart steady but restless. She told herself it was just conversation, kind, thoughtful conversation. But deep down, something had shifted. The following week, she ran into him again at Mark's office event. Mark had invited her to a client dinner, and she'd gone mostly to show support. The restaurant was elegant, all dim lights and soft music. Mark was busy charming clients, barely noticing her after introductions. But Tom was there, sitting a few seats away, and when their eyes met, he gave her a small, understanding smile, the kind that said, "You don't have to pretend with me." Later, when the event ended, the rain had started again, soft but steady. Mark had to stay back for one last discussion, so Tom offered again to drive her home. She hesitated for a second, but nodded. The drive was quiet, except for the rain and the faint sound of the radio. At a red light, Claire looked out at the misty city lights reflecting on the wet pavement. "It always rains when you drive me," she said softly. Tom smiled. "Maybe the weather just knows when we need to slow down." She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You say things like that, calm things. It's rare." He glanced at her. "I've learned that silence can say a lot if you let it." When they reached her house, she didn't move right away. She looked at him, at the kind eyes, the quiet steadiness, the warmth that made her feel seen again. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For reminding me what calm feels like." He looked at her for a long moment, as if he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. "You deserve calm," he said finally. She got out, closing the door gently behind her. But as she turned back, rain catching in her hair. "Claire," he said quietly through the open window, "sometimes the right person shows up at the wrong time. It doesn't mean it's wrong to notice." The words struck something deep in her chest. She stood frozen as he drove away, his taillights fading into the dark street. That night she couldn't sleep. The sound of rain kept echoing through her mind, and every drop seemed to carry his voice. She knew she shouldn't feel what she was feeling. Tom was kind, respectful, and he worked with her husband. But the truth she couldn't ignore was that she felt alive again, seen, heard, understood, something she hadn't felt in years. The next morning, Mark mentioned Tom casually at breakfast. "He's a good worker," he said. "Quiet, but dependable." Claire nodded, trying to keep her face neutral. "He seems like that." Mark didn't notice her tone. He was already scrolling through his phone, lost in work again. Claire finished her coffee silently, her heart heavy with thoughts she couldn't share. Days passed. She didn't see Tom, didn't text him, but the silence between them was almost louder than their conversations had been. Then one afternoon, while she was out walking near the park, she saw a familiar figure sitting on a bench. Tom, reading something, his umbrella resting by his side. She hesitated but walked over. "Fancy seeing you here," she said lightly. He looked up, surprised but smiling. "I could say the same." "You live nearby?" "Just a few blocks over," she said. "I walk here when I need to clear my head." They sat for a while, talking about small things, books, work, the weather. But beneath the surface, there was a quiet current neither could name. As the clouds darkened, he stood up and opened his umbrella, holding it above both of them. "Come on," he said softly. "I'll walk you home before the sky decides to flood the city." They walked side by side, their shoulders almost brushing, the rain pattering softly above. It was innocent, nothing more than two people sharing an umbrella. But Claire felt her heartbeat quicken anyway. When they reached her street, she turned to him. "You always seem to show up when it rains." He smiled, eyes warm. "Maybe that's just when you need someone to walk with." She didn't reply. She couldn't. She just watched him go, his figure fading into the mist inside. She leaned against the door, the sound of rain growing louder outside. She knew she was standing on dangerous ground, not in action, but in emotion. Yet, for the first time in years, she didn't feel numb. That night, as she looked out the window, she whispered to herself, "Maybe some people enter your life just to remind you what your heart sounds like." And though she didn't know where it would lead, she knew one thing for sure. This quiet connection was changing something inside her. Something she could no longer pretend wasn't real. The following days passed in silence. Yet Claire could feel the quiet tension hanging in the air. She tried to go about her routine, work, home, cooking, sleep, but nothing felt normal anymore. Every time it rained, she found herself staring out the window, waiting, though she didn't know what she was waiting for. It wasn't love she was chasing, not the kind that broke vows or hearts. It was connection, something simple, honest, human. One morning, Mark left early for a business trip, barely saying goodbye. "Don't wait up for me," he muttered, already looking at his phone. She nodded, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. When the door closed, she stood there for a moment. the echo of it reminding her how quiet the house had become. By afternoon, the clouds rolled in again. The world outside dimmed under the silver shade of rain. She made tea and sat near the window, watching the drops race down the glass. That's when her phone buzzed, a message from Tom. "Mark asked me to drop off some files tomorrow. Is that still okay?" Her heart skipped, though she quickly typed back, "Yes, of course. You can come by any time." The next day, he arrived just after noon. The rain had softened to a light drizzle, and Claire opened the door before he could knock. "You're right on time," she said, smiling softly. He handed her the envelope. "Didn't want to leave these in the office. Mark said they were important." "Thank you," she said. Then, after a pause, "Do you have a minute? I made coffee." He hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. "Sure, I could use some." They sat at the kitchen table again, the same place where their quiet friendship had begun. For a few moments, neither spoke. Then Tom said gently, "You seem tired? Are you okay?" Claire looked at him, her fingers circling the rim of her cup. "I don't know. I think I've just forgotten what it feels like to be seen." He didn't rush to answer. His eyes softened. Sometimes being unseen hurts more than being alone. She nodded, a lump rising in her throat. "Mark I send tea unkind. He's just somewhere else all the time. And I'm here, pretending it doesn't bother me." Tom reached out slightly, not touching her, just resting his hand near hers. "You don't have to pretend with me," he said quietly. That simple sentence broke something inside her. Not in a painful way, but like a door quietly opening. She exhaled, the sound trembling. "You say that like you know what it feels like." "I do," he said. "I was married once. It ended not because of anger, but silence. We just stopped seeing each other. There was no pity between them, only understanding." The rain outside had stopped, leaving behind the smell of wet earth. She looked at him then, and for the first time, she didn't see Mark's colleague, she saw someone who understood the language. Her heart had been whispering for years. He stayed for another hour, helping her organize the papers, laughing softly at the mess on her desk. The laughter felt real, unforced. When he stood to leave, she walked him to the door. "Thank you," she said again, meaning more than just for the files. He smiled. "You don't have to thank me for listening." As he stepped outside, the wind lifted the edge of her hair. "Claire," he said before walking to his car, "some people heal just by being near others who understand them. Maybe that's all this is." She nodded, but as she watched him drive away, she couldn't help feeling that what was growing between them wasn't just healing. It was awakening. Over the next few weeks, they saw each other more often, always by chance or through work-related reasons. They talked about everything, not about love, not about Mark, but about life, dreams, things they'd lost and never said aloud. Claire began painting again, something she hadn't done in years. When Tom saw her sketches, he said quietly, "You bring light even into quiet places." Those words stayed with her. She began to smile more, laugh more. And though she tried to hide it, Mark noticed the change. "You seem happier lately," he said one evening, as he scrolled through his phone. "Maybe I'm just trying to be," she answered softly. He nodded absently, not looking up. It was then she realized it wasn't that she stopped loving Mark. It was that their love had gone silent. Like a song paused too long. One evening, Mark had to attend a late meeting, and Claire decided to walk through the park. The air was cool, the sky painted in shades of dusk. She didn't plan to see Tom, but there he was, sitting on the same bench where they'd met before, reading again. He looked up, surprised but smiling. "You always appear when the sky looks like this," Kay said. "Maybe it's the only time I feel like myself," she replied. He gestured for her to sit, and they talked quietly, their voices blending with the whispering trees. For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was peaceful. Then Tom said softly, "You ever think about starting over?" Claire thought about it. "Sometimes, but then I think, maybe we don't always need to start over. Maybe we just need to remember who we were before we forgot." He nodded slowly. That's a beautiful way to put it. The wind picked up and a few drops of rain began to fall again. They both laughed softly. Seems like the rain follows us, she said. Or maybe it's reminding us that even storms can be gentle, he replied. When they stood to leave, she felt something shift inside her, not toward him, but toward herself. For the first time in years, she felt strong enough to face her own heart. That night, when she got home, Mark was already there, sitting at the kitchen table. "Where were you?" He asked, not harshly, just curious. "Just out walking," she said calmly. He looked at her for a long moment. "You've changed," he said finally. "I think I just started remembering who I am," she said quietly. He didn't answer, but something in his expression softened a realization, maybe even regret. Over the next few days, Mark began to notice her more. He asked about her paintings, joined her for breakfast, even took a day off to spend time with her. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Claire saw Tom only once more at the office, passing by in the hall. He smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that said everything without words. She smiled back, grateful. That night, the rain returned one last time, steady and calm. Claire stood by the window, watching it fall, and whispered to herself, "Sometimes, people don't come into your life to stay. They come to show you how to find your way back." And as she turned off the light, she realized the rain no longer made her feel lonely. It made her feel alive. The weeks passed quietly after that last meeting. Life began to settle into a rhythm again, though something inside Claire had changed forever. She wasn't searching anymore. She wasn't waiting for anyone to save her. What Tom had given her wasn't love in the way people whispered about. It was perspective. He had reminded her that even hearts buried under silence could learn to beat again. Mark seemed to notice too. He started coming home earlier, helping her cook, asking about her day. At first it felt strange, like talking to someone she hadn't seen in years. But slowly they found small ways to reconnect. Sometimes it was through laughter over burnt toast. Sometimes through quiet moments on the couch where no words were needed. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Mark turned to her and said, "I know I haven't been the husband you deserve. I got lost somewhere along the way, chasing work, success, and forgetting why I started all of it in the first place." His voice was low, almost fragile. Claire looked at him, her heart softening. "It's not too late," she said quietly. He reached for her hand, and for the first time in years, she didn't pull away. The warmth that spread through her chest wasn't excitement or passion, it was peace. The kind that came from forgiveness, not forgetting, still. Some nights she found herself thinking of that drive with Tom, the soft rain. The laughter, the unspoken understanding between them. It wasn't regret. It was gratitude. He had entered her life at a time when she needed to remember that she was more than someone's wife or someone's shadow. She was her own person, capable of feeling, choosing, and rebuilding. A month later, Mark invited her to join him at his company's charity dinner. She hadn't attended any work event with him in years, but this time she said yes. She chose a simple navy dress, tied her hair loosely, and when she stepped into the event hall beside him, she felt both nervous and calm at once. The room was filled with familiar faces, colleagues, clients' laughter echoing over the soft music. Claire smiled politely, greeting people, when suddenly, across the room, she saw Tom. He was standing near the back, talking with someone, his usual calm demeanor intact. When their eyes met, there was no surprise. No tension, only understanding. He gave a small nod, a quiet smile that said, "I'm glad you're okay." She smiled back, and in that brief exchange, she realized something powerful. Some people cross your path not to stay, but to help you change direction. Later that evening, Mark introduced her to a few of his coworkers, and one of them mentioned Tom's transferring to Seattle next week. Big project. They say it's a great opportunity. Claire froze for a second, then simply nodded. She knew it was right. He deserved to move forward too. When the dinner ended, and she and Mark walked to their car, the city lights reflected off the wet pavement. The rain had returned, soft and steady. "I didn't know Tom was leaving," Mark said as he started the engine. She looked out the window, her voice gentle. He was always meant to. Mark glanced at her, unsure what she meant, but didn't press. The drive home was quiet, comfortable even. For once, the silence didn't feel like distance, it felt shared. The next morning, Claire went for a walk near the park. The air was cool, the sky gray. When she reached the bench where she and Tom had talked so many times before, she sat for a while, letting the breeze tangle her hair. She thought about how everything had begun, an unexpected car ride. A few kind words and a connection that had taught her more than she could have imagined. Suddenly, she heard footsteps. Turning slightly, she saw Tom walking toward her. He looked surprised, but not uneasy. "I thought you'd be at work," he said with a smile. "I could ask you the same," she replied. "I'm heading to the airport this afternoon. Thought I'd take one last walk before I leave." She nodded, smiling softly. "Seattle's lucky to have you," he laughed quietly. "You make it sound like I'm going to change the city." "Maybe not the city," she said, "but you'll make it better just by being there." For a few moments, neither spoke. The air between them was calm, filled with gratitude and closure. Then Tom said, "You look happier." "I am," she answered honestly. "For a while, I forgot who I was. But I think I remember now." He smiled. "That's all I ever wanted for you." When he turned to go, she stood too. "Tom," she called softly. He stopped and looked back. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, his eyes warm. "Goodbye, Claire." And just like that, he walked away. No promises, no lingering goodbyes, just peace. She watched until he disappeared into the distance, then sat back down. The rain began to fall again, gentle as a memory. Later that evening, Mark came home early, holding a bouquet of daisies, her favorite. "I thought we could have dinner together," he said. She smiled, surprised. "What's the occasion?" He shrugged lightly. "No occasion, just us." That night, as they cooked side by side, Claire realized that the life she had been searching for wasn't gone. It had only been waiting for her to breathe new life into it. She wasn't the same woman she had been months ago. She was stronger, calmer, and more open. Mark leaned against the counter, watching her stir the sauce. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. She turned, her smile gentle. "Thank you." They ate together, laughing softly between bites, rediscovering the rhythm they once had. There was no dramatic ending, no grand confession, just two people finding their way back. Slowly and honestly. Later that night, Claire stood by the window again, looking out at the rain. But this time, it didn't feel heavy or lonely. It felt like renewal. She whispered softly, "Some rides don't take you away, they bring you home." And in that moment, she knew she had finally found peace, not because of Tom, not because of Mark, but because she had found herself. The next morning, she picked up her paintbrush again. The canvas was blank, waiting. With the first stroke, color returned to her world. The ride that had once changed everything had now come full circle, teaching her that sometimes the most unexpected moments lead us back to where we truly belong.